Hey, this is Flo, and this is the introduction to the new video series that I'm launching right now. And in this series, we will actually look at the WidgetKit. I will teach you about the very basics, intermediate stuff, and then how you can actually implement and use it in practice. And we will do that by building on top of the stocks app that we made in last month's 30-day app challenge from Code with Chris. So I'm using that as a base. So if you want to get a head start, then I would suggest you to watch that series first. I think it's 8 videos, so it shouldn't take too long. And then in this series we will create a widget. We will add a widget extension, set up a custom configuration. I will tell you about the structure of all of the pre-generated code, because Xcode actually generates a lot of code for you already when adding a widget extension to your project. I will then we will then separate all of that code, make it a bit cleaner, and finally work on our own custom widget, which will, for example, also use some files that are already in the app target, and we will add them to the widget extension as well. This is just a very quick overview of all of the topics that we're going to cover in this series. If you are excited for the series, then please hit a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next episode. Hey, this is Flo, and welcome to the first real episode of our WidgetKit series. As I've said in episode 0, we will start by taking the stocks app that we have developed over the course of the last few videos in the 30-day app challenge from Code with Chris for last month, and we will actually add a widget extension. So let's just get into it. So to add an extension, just go to File, New, Target, and then just search for widget. And then you can already see the widget extension here. Click Next. You should give it a name. I'll just call it Stocks Widget, like this. All of this should be fine. Because we will use configuration intents, you should definitely check the include configuration intent box here, because we're going to use that. Then hit Finish. You can activate the scheme. Let me quickly explain to you what that did. So basically now you have 2 schemes to build your project. One scheme to actually build the iPhone app, and then one scheme to just build the widget extension, which is very handy because this can be used to, for example, automatically install the widget on the simulator, and you don't have to do anything and you can just test it really quickly. Okay, so we're selecting that widget extension. Okay, now if you notice, we have this stocks app folder here. Let me collapse that. And now there's actually a stocks widget folder, which I can open up, and there is a couple of files in here. So first of all, there's an info plist, like always. There is an asset catalog, which you can use separately from the asset catalog of the app. We have an intent definition. So this is basically the configuration intent that I just told you to check. And then we have the code, which is actually all inside of one single file here. Okay, so as you can see, there's an intent timeline provider, there's a timeline entry, then there's a view here, so stuff like this should be familiar to you. Then there's the actual entry point to the widget extension, which is a struct conforming to widget, which is very similar to the struct conforming to app in your app target, which also has a body similar to views, but it's not of a view, it's actually a widget configuration. We'll go into this in the next episode. And then of course at the bottom we also have a preview provider, which is very handy because that way you don't have to actually run the simulator. So let me actually open up the canvas in this file and hit resume, and now Xcode will actually build and run this widget here. Let's wait for a second. Okay, and as you can see, the preview works. We have a system small widget here. We'll go into detail about what all the size classes are in a later video. But as you can see, this is just a dummy widget that was generated by Xcode, so we don't have to write all of the boilerplate code ourselves. Okay, that's already it for the first episode. I just wanted to show you how to add the extension, and then in the next one I will show you how to set up a configuration intent to let the user configure a widget, and for example, in our case, we will let the user enter a stock symbol like IBM or AAPL for Apple, and then the widget will actually fetch the stock data for that symbol. Okay, if you liked the video, please make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel to not miss the next episodes, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Hey, this is Flo and welcome back to the next part of the WidgetKit series. In the first part, we actually just added the extension to our project, and I went over all of the generated code very briefly. In this part, I will tell you a bit more detail about the generated code, about the structure of a widget, how you need to implement it, and then we will actually look at how to add a configuration intent or how to edit a configuration intent to enable the user to enter a stock symbol like IBM or AAPL, and then change the widget's content based on that. So if you like the series so far, please make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below what you wish to be covered in a future video series or just a single video. Okay, so let's get into this. And actually, to explain to you how the widget works, I will scroll down all the way until we find our main entry point to the widget. And I've actually told you about this already. So basically the starting point is very similar to our stocks app starting point in the main iOS app. So there's a struct conforming to app, which has a body, and in that our UI is rendered. This is very similar in a widget. So we have a struct conforming to widget because we're not dealing with an actual app here. And then it has a body, which renders our UI and our configuration and so on. Now, as you can see, there is a widget configuration in here, and we are using an intent configuration. There's also a static configuration, but intent configurations allow the user to change some parameters like the stock symbol. In this intent configuration, we pass basically the name or the identifier of the widget, which in this case is just stocks widget. Then we also pass the intent that we actually want the user to be able to edit or that we want to have inside of our view, which is the configuration intent. So this is just pre-generated by Xcode when we selected include configuration intent in our target. Then we have a provider, which is the timeline provider up here. So this basically is needed because widgets work on a timeline similar to watch complications, which enables the widget to be refreshed at set intervals and to reload basically. So you need some sort of timeline here. And then this is very SwiftUI style. So you get an entry in here in a trailing closure, and then you just have your actual view. So this is basically this up here, just SwiftUI views. And for that view, you usually pass your timeline entry, which in this case just contains a date. This is needed, and then a configuration, which is the configuration intent. Then this intent configuration can also be customized. So for example, you can give your widget a name. This is helpful if you want to add several different widgets to an app. So then you could name one, for example, a stocks widget, and one a statistics widget, and one a whatever widget. So this enables you to have different names for different kinds of widgets. Then you can also add descriptions. And then you can also add the supported families. So as you know, there are 3 kinds of widgets right now. There is the system small, which you can see on the right hand side here. Then there is the system medium, which is basically twice the width of this one. And then there's the system large, which is basically 4 times as big as this widget here. And now here in the supported families, you can actually just pass an array of all of the different supported families that you want. In this case, let's just add system medium in here. Let's resume the preview. And now it should show us a medium-sized widget. Actually, it doesn't, because our preview context says system small, so we should change that to system medium. And now you can see the preview shows us a medium-sized widget. So what this supported families up here does is it toggles which families the user can actually select. So in code we can force a different size, but the user can now only select a medium-sized widget. Let me show that to you on the simulator. So I'll just run the extension scheme which we selected up here. Okay, as you can see, the widget got automatically installed because we selected the widget extension scheme in Xcode. And now if I edit the home screen, tap the plus icon, then there should be the stocks app right here. We can tap on that, and as you can see, now the user can't select any other widget except for the medium-sized one because we specified it here in the supported families. Then our description and configuration display name are also displayed right here. And now the last thing, we can tap and hold the widget, and right now nothing happens. And now the last thing, we can tap and hold the widget, and now, oops. And the last thing, we can tap and hold the widget and select Edit Widget right here, which will then open up the configuration. Right now there is nothing to configure because we haven't added any parameters, but let's actually look at that right now. To change the configuration parameters, we need to go into our intent definition, which is called stocksWidget.intent definition. And then you can see our configuration intent here. You can change the name. You definitely need to check that it is eligible for widgets because otherwise we can't use it in our widget. And now the most important part is the parameter list down here. So let's just add a parameter. Let's call it symbol because that's what we actually want the user to enter. We want them to enter, for example, IBM, AAPL, TSLA, whatever, some stock symbol. And now on the right hand side here you can change the display name. So this is the internal name of the generated class member. And then on the right hand side here is the displayed name for the user when they edit the widget. You can change the data type. We will actually use string because that's what we need. You could enable it to be an array. Now there's different other options here. We don't really need them. We could, for example, provide a default value of IBM. We can also change the keyboard settings here. So capitalizations, we could actually set it to all characters because that's how stock symbols work, right? They're all capitalized. And then there's a couple of other settings, but I don't think that they're really important for the basic understanding. Okay, so now this symbol parameter is part of our configuration intent. Now if we run the target again, okay, we actually also need to add a zero dialog here. So let's just put in some test value. Let's build again. Now it should work. We don't really care about the zero dialog right now. Now the build works. Let's actually run it on the simulator now. Okay, and now if we edit the widget, we have the symbol parameter here, which we can enter some text into. It gets auto-capitalized. And then this is actually sent to the widget. What this now allows us to do is, for example, scroll down here into our stocks widget entry view, so our actual SwiftUI view that is displayed inside of the widget. And let's embed this text, for example, in a VStack. And below the time, we could add a text of our entry.configuration.symbol. This is now generated for us. This is optional, so we can optionally chain it with, for example, no value like this. Now if we run the widget again, let's see what happens. Okay, and as you can see, now the symbol value of our configuration intent that the user actually entered when they edited the widget is now displayed inside of the view. Okay, so that's it for the configuration intents for this episode. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for the next video. Bye! Hey, this is Flo, and welcome back to the third part of our WidgetKit series, where we take the Stocks app from the 30-day Stocks app challenge from Code with Chris for the month of May, and we add a widget to it, and I explain to you all the details about configuration intents, timelines, the general setup of widgets, and so on. Until now, we have only altered this a little bit, but what we have actually done is we have worked on our configuration intent and we added the symbol parameter, which represents a stock symbol, and we have already displayed the value in a text view here. Today we are going to actually work on the widget itself, so the UI. But before we do that, I want to actually separate all of this code, because right now there's 4 different structs in one file. I personally just really don't like that. So what I will do is create separate files for all of these structs. So let's start at the top with the timeline provider. Let's copy this whole struct and let's delete it from in here, and then just create a new file. Let's just call it timeline provider, like this. Now in the target section down below, make sure it is not in the actual stocks app, but it is in the stocks widget extension. Hit create. And then in here, we definitely need WidgetKit. I think we also need intents. And then we can just paste in the provider here. Okay, next up, I want to extract the entry, the timeline entry. So let's remove that as well. Create a new file. Let's call it timeline entry. Once again, make sure that the correct target is selected. Hit create. Import WidgetKit. Paste it in there. I don't think we need intents in here, so that should be fine. And then the last thing that I want to extract is our actual widget view. So let's copy it, remove it as well, create a last Swift file. Let's call it widget view, or let's actually call it stocks widget view. Make sure the correct target is selected. Hit create. And here we need SwiftUI. We also need WidgetKit, I think. Let's paste it, and that should be fine. Okay, so now that we have separated all the code, it will be a lot easier to navigate. Let's hit Command B to build the project. Okay, it failed. Why did it fail? Because now that we have separated it into different files, we actually need to specify that this is a simple entry here, and now this should work as well. I'm not quite sure why this is the case, because you can leave the generic entry protocol in here. I think it's a protocol in another class. Don't quote me on that. If you have it all in one file, but if you separate the files, then that doesn't work anymore. If you know the solution, maybe you can just write a comment down below. Okay, so now that we have everything separated, I want to show you how to use code from the iOS app inside of the widget extension. And we have basically already covered this when we created the new files. So if we open the panel here on the right, click on the file inspector, and then in the target membership, we need to make sure that any file that we want to use in the widget extension is actually a member of the widget extension target. So for example, in this widget, I want to use the line chart that we created. I also need the network calls, so the everything that we have in the content view model. And obviously we also need our stock data model and the API key. So what we are now going to do is, for example, go into the line chart, go into the inspector on the right and select the widget extension as another target. Then we can close this again. And now we can actually use the line chart in the widget extension. We will also do the same for the stock data, which is our data model, added to the extension. Now we also have the content view model the thing is that we have no service. So we would have to extract this into a service. Let me do this real quick. This isn't really important for the WidgetKit course itself. So I just show you what I did and get back to you in a second. Okay, so I've actually done a really quick refactoring. I have added a services group and extracted everything from our getStockData function into a static function of a stock service. It is literally copy-paste, so nothing to find here, except that I had to erase it to any publisher. So I could return an any publisher, which makes it just a bit cleaner. If you want to learn more about Combine, then you can just watch my Combine video. But now I have this stock service, so this is reusable, so I can now add it to the stocks widget extension target, close this file, and as you can see, I just called it in our content view model. So now we can close the content view model as well. Of course, I also added the API key.swift to our target, so we can use it in the stock service. Okay, so right now we are inside of the view. Let's close this right panel here, but I actually want to see the preview, so let's just fix the preview, and now it is also shown when we change files, so let's hit resume. Okay, now that we have the stock service and everything from the app in our widget extension target, you would think that you could, for example, call the service in the view, but that actually doesn't work because views in widgets can't get updated or redrawn. So what you actually need to do is you need to add whatever you want to have computed in your entry and then compute it in the timeline. This might sound a bit weird, but let me show you what I mean by this. Okay, so in the timeline entry, this is basically our data struct. This is basically all of the values that we want to show in the view. So we also want some stock data. So let's add stock data here to our simple entry. Now inside of the timeline, actually let's make the stock data optional because that makes it easier to use it in the placeholder and in the snapshot. Okay, so now that we have the stock data in our timeline entry, our simple entry, we can go into the timeline provider and actually create a function to actually fetch the data. So let's create a func get or create timeline entry. Okay, this will need a date of type date. It will need a configuration of type configuration intent, and then we will also need the closure here at the end. Let's actually call it completion. So this is what's called with the entry as the content. So let's copy the signature from here. Let's paste it in there. Okay. So now we can use our stock service .get stock data for our configuration.symbol, and since this is optional, we can optional chain it, and if it's nil, let's just use IBM as a placeholder. Then we can subscribe to this. Let's not care about the completion for now. Doesn't really matter at the moment. Let's just care about what happens when we get some stock data in. So let's create an entry. So let entry equals a simple entry with the date that we got, with the configuration that we got, and with the stock data that we just received here. Let's store all of this in a set of any cancelable, and to do that you actually need to change the provider from a struct to a class, because otherwise you can't mutate the cancelable set. So let's say var cancelables is a type of set any cancelable, and let's initialize it to be empty. To be able to use any cancelable, you of course need to import combine here at the top. Now we can store the subscription in our set here. And now this function can be used in the get snapshot. So let's just say create timeline entry for the current date with the given configuration and with the given completion handler here. In the placeholder, we actually don't care about the stock data. So let's just set that to nil. So let me explain to you why there are three different functions anyways. So the placeholder is, as the name suggests, just a placeholder until the actual widget is loaded. This is, for example, shown when the user adds a widget. Then get snapshot is just basically the current version of the widget. And then get timeline can be used to construct a timeline, for example, to update the widget every hour. So that's something that you could do. For this example, we will just have one entry in the timeline. So what we're going to do is, first of all, we forgot to call the completion handler down here. So let's call the completion handler on the simple entry that we just created. And now in here, the timeline will just consist of one simple entry. So we should create another function. This will be very similar. You could refactor this, of course. So let's just call this one create timeline. And instead of returning just a simple entry to the closure, we want to return a timeline with the generic type simple entry. And now we can't do it like this, so we need to create a timeline. So let timeline equals a timeline, and we will just have our one entry in there. And now there is a reload policy, and since we only have one entry, we actually don't need to reload this. So let's just say never. Then we can call the completion block with the timeline. And this now enables us to scrap all of this code in the getTimeline function and just call our create timeline for the current date with the given configuration from the timeline call and with the given completion handler. Okay, so as I said, in most cases you want up-to-date information in your widget, so you should definitely create several entries in the timeline, put them into an array and pass that array into the timeline here, and then call the completion block with all of these different entries. Just for the sake of simplicity, I'm not going to do that, but it shouldn't be too hard to do that yourself. Let me actually explain the timeline in a bit more detail, because I think I skipped over it a bit too much until now. So what we did is we called the create timeline method in the get timeline method, which is part of the intent timeline provider protocol. Now what the timeline allows you to do is to create an array of entries, each with a date specified. So for example, you could create an entry for right now, which is the current state of the widget. And then you create a second entry in 30 minutes, which would then refresh the widget and show some new information. And then 30 minutes later, another entry, and so on. So you could split up basically the future, so the timeline of your widget. When is this useful? For example, in a calendar app, where you already know what you want to display in, say, 30 or 60 minutes. But as we are dealing with stocks here, we can't predict them. So they are going to change in the future, but we don't know to which value. So we also don't know what to feed into our widget view, so what we need in our simple entry. Because of that, it really makes no sense to already create the entries for the future inside of the timeline. So what we can do instead is, when we initialize the timeline here, we just pass the single entry for right now with the current stock data that we fetched from our stock service. And we can actually provide a policy. And now if I remove this and press the dot again, you can see the three options. So the first option is at end, a policy that specifies that WidgetKit requests a new timeline after the last date in this timeline passes. So once the last entry's date in this timeline is over, then the getTimeline method will get called again and a new timeline is generated. Never, as a time reload policy, specifies that the app prompts WidgetKit when a new timeline is available. And then the third policy, after a date, a policy that specifies a future date for WidgetKit to request a new timeline. So with that, you could, for example, fill your timeline for 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and you know there won't be any events in the calendar from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. So you can then just say, okay, you don't need to refresh the timeline at night. Let's just refresh it after 8 a.m. tomorrow. Just an idea where this could be useful. I think in our case, the @end policy is useful because, as again, WidgetKit requests a new timeline after the last date in a timeline passes. So this could, for example, be useful. So we could put this right here. And then internally, WidgetKit also doesn't request a new timeline over and over and over again because the operating system iOS actually throttles it and handles the amount of requests you can send. So I think it's rather safe, at least at the moment, to use the @end policy here. Because once again, after this entry here is over, then a new timeline will get requested. Okay, so now our timeline provider is done. So we can actually go back into our stocks widget view. As you remember, our timeline entry now has the stock data associated with it. So what we can do is we could change this now a bit, and for example add another text field with the entry .configuration, not .configuration, .stock data. This is optional, so we need to optional chain it, and let's, for example, say the latest close value, which is a computed value I think that we created. And since this is optionally chained, we should add a default value here. So let's just say default. Okay. I'm not sure if it will work in the preview, so let's find out. Okay, so it won't work in the preview because the preview actually doesn't call the timeline. So we will have to run this in the simulator. Okay, and as you can see, the widget now displays the current time from the first text view here. It displays the selected symbol from the second text view here, and it displays the latest close value which we fetched via an API in this third text view here. Now, the next thing that should be done is add the line chart that we created in the stocks app and actually put it inside of our view here. So let's do that real quick. For that, what we can do is look into our content view and see how it is implemented here. Okay, so it just takes the close values of the stock data. So actually, I think we can just copy all of this code here. So let's just copy it, go into our stocks widget view. I think we can remove the date now. We can also remove the latest close values and instead put in the line chart. We don't have a stock, but what we have is our entry.stockData.close values. And if those are nil, then we'll just pass in an empty array. Okay, so let's hit try again here. I think we will see nothing because the array will in fact be empty because the stock data will be nil from the preview. So let's just run this in the simulator right away and then we can see what happens. Okay, and as you can see, now we have our symbol at the top because this is a V-stack with the symbol here, and then we have our line chart below. And now If we tap on the widget, it actually directly opens the app. Okay, great. That's it for this part. I know it's a very lengthy one. I hope you still learned a lot. I hope it was fun. And in the next one, we will handle different size classes and adding different widgets to one app. So see you in the next one. Hey, this is Flo and welcome back to the next part of the WidgetKit course. In this part, I'll just show you how to actually add multiple widgets to your widget extension. And for that, we need to go into our stocks widget file or wherever your widget struct is located. Right now, you can see that it is annotated with add main, meaning that this is the main entry point into the widget. And if we want to add multiple widgets, then we need to change this entry point. For that, we will first of all create a new struct, and let's call it stocks widget bundle, and this will actually conform to widget bundle like this. Now a widget bundle also needs a body, so let's add that body of type some widget. Okay, and this body actually needs to be a widget bundle builder like this, annotated like this. Okay, and now inside of the body we need to add all of the widgets that we want to have. So right now only the stocks widget exists, so we can just put the stocks widget in here like this and then move the main annotation from the stocks widget to the widget bundle. Right now nothing actually changes in the app, but if you implement a second widget, which for example could show multiple stocks or some other data, then you can just put it in here next to the stocks widget. I'll just put the stocks widget in here twice, but actually you would want another widget in here. But this is the way how to add multiple different widgets with different timeline providers, different timeline entries, different views, and different functionality into just one widget extension. Okay, that's already it for this very short video. And in the next part, we will look at how to actually create different size classes and then display different content based on the size classes. So see you then. Hey, this is Flo and welcome back to the WidgetKit course. Last time I showed you how to add multiple widgets to one widget extension, and this time I will show you how to add multiple supported families to one widget and then also display different content based on which family is given. Okay, so first of all, you want to move into your widget struct, which in my case is the stocks widget, in the stocks widget.swift file. And in the body here, we have a configuration of our actual widget view, which in this case is called stocks widget entry view, and it is a intent configuration. Just as a reminder, there's also a static configuration, but as we want the user to be able to enter a stock symbol, we need the intent configuration using our configuration intent. Okay, so now to actually support different widget size classes, there is the supported families modifier down here, and in there you just pass an array of all the size classes that you want to support. So for example, we have added system medium, but you could also add system small or system large. So let's add system small. Now to actually see see the new widget in the preview, we could change the preview context family in this preview, or what we could do is copy all of it, create a group in here, paste it back in, and then paste it in another time, but this time with a different family. Now if I rerun the preview, you will notice that we will have two widgets. So at the top we will have the system medium size widget, and at the bottom we will have the system small size widget. Let's actually look at that in the simulator as well. Okay, so as you can see from the previous episodes, we still have the medium-sized widget up here, and we also have the small sized widget down here. And if we now edit the home screen, tap the plus icon, scroll down to the Stocks app, then you will see the system small size is available, but the system medium size is also available. Okay, now to actually change the widget's content based on the supported size, based on the selected size, one idea would be to create different widgets. One which only supports, for example, system small with its own timeline provider and its own timeline entries. And then another widget only supporting system medium with its own timeline provider and its own timeline entries. And then putting both of these widgets in our widget bundle body. This is one way to do it. But the easier way is to just support both families for our stocks widget, and now go into the stocks widget view, and inside of the stocks widget view we can actually grab the widget family from the environment. So just say add environment, and then the key path is widget family, and store this in a variable. Let me just call it family. Since you can see that syntax highlighting works, this is actually the correct notation. Let's option click on this, and here you can see the template of the widget, small, medium, or large. And now we can change what is displayed based on the widget family. So in our body, we could now grab all of the VStack, copy it and remove it. Okay, and here we can actually just create a switch statement on the widget family. So let's just say switch over the family. One case would be system small. In here we could, for example, just show some text. Another case would be system medium. Those are the two families that we're actually supporting. Let's for now also just put some text in here. And then in the default case, let's just say not implemented. Okay, so this will work. And now what we can do is in the system medium, just paste our VStack back in, and this way we can actually show different content based on the widget size. Now what you should obviously do is not put the VStack in here, but actually create a different view for it and then just call the view in here. Now all of this works because the body is actually a view builder, otherwise you wouldn't be able to switch over the family and show different views, but that's a topic for another video. Okay, so what we could now say in here, just for simplicity reasons, let's remove this VStack again, put in a text saying medium size, and in the system small, let's just say small size, and then default should be not implemented. Now we can go back to our stocks widget, resume the preview, and then you will see that the medium sized widget will just say medium size, and the small size widget will just say small size, because those are the views that we return in our switch statement. Now, for example, in the system medium, we could paste the VStack back in, and this will work. Right now, the line chart is not displayed because the configuration intent has no value for the symbol parameter. But if we run this again in the simulator, you will see that the small size now actually shows small size as we have specified in our switch statement, and the medium size widget will actually show our VStack with the symbol and the line chart as we have specified over here. Okay, that's it for this part. I hope that you learned something, and if you did, please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Hey, this is Flo and welcome back to the WidgetKit course. In this episode I will show you how to feed the user custom data to choose from when configuring the widget through a configuration intent. Right now our widget has a symbol field which the user can actually enter a string into, and then this string will get passed into the widget. But what we want is for the user to not be able to put in any string, but just one of the different objects that we provide the user with. So for that we will actually go into our intent definition, And for the parameters, we will add another parameter, and let's call this custom symbol. Okay. For the type, we will say add type, and let's call this one custom symbol, like this. It will have an identifier and a display string. Both of these are required. Okay, let's go back to the configuration, to the custom symbol, make sure the type is set correctly. Good. Now what we need to do is we need to add another extension to our app. So let's say File, New, Target. Let's search for Intent extension or Intents extension. Hit Next. Let's just call it Stocks App Intents. Don't hit Include UI extension and select Starting Point None. The default here is messaging, but we don't need a starting point. Okay, let's hit Finish. Activate the scheme. All right. And now you will see on the left-hand side here, we have the Stocks app, we have the Stocks widget, and we have the Stocks app intents now. We only need the widget and the intents for now. So the first thing that we need to do is add the intent definition to our intent target like this. Okay, then we can go into the intent handler. Okay, now in this intent handler, we need to provide a function that gives the user all of the options to choose from which we want to provide. So for that, Apple actually has a great website. So you need to implement the provide options collection function. So actually what I will do is just copy their implementation and change it to what we need. So we called our custom type custom symbol. So instead of provide character options collection, we will say provide custom symbol options collection for intent configuration intent. That's why we had to add our intent definition to this target. And then the type here will be custom symbol, and all of this can be removed. Okay, we can keep this. Let's actually call the collection symbols instead of characters. And now what we can do is say, let symbols of type custom symbol equal, and in here put all of the symbols that we want the user to be able to pick. Okay, obviously you could fetch these from core data now or via an API or however you want to provide all of the options. We will do it the most basic way. So let's say we are just gonna add a few custom symbols. We're going to use this simple initializer, give it an identifier and a display name. So let's say we want Apple, and as a display name just say Apple, and let's add another one, custom symbol with the same initializer. Let's do TSLA, and for the display name let's say Tesla. Okay, so there are still 3 quick things that we need to do for this to actually work. So first of all, in our intent definition, we need to make the custom symbol dynamic. So let's check options are provided dynamically here. Then we need to go into the intent handler. First of all, make it a member of the widget extension. And second of all, conform to a protocol called configuration intent handling. Now the first part here is just the name of your intent, and this protocol is actually generated automatically by Xcode. So let's have a look at it. Jump to definition. Here you can see automatically generated, and it just has this one function that we just implemented. Okay, now we can run this in the simulator. Okay, let's hit edit widget. You can see there's still the string symbol that the user can enter, but also now the custom symbol that the user can choose. And you can see this quick search field comes up here, and both of the custom symbols are displayed. Now obviously the display name is displayed, so Apple instead of AAPL. let's just select Apple for now, and you can see it is saved in here. Okay, but how do we actually work with this data in the widget now? This is also pretty easy. Let's take a look at it. Okay, what we could now do is, for example, add another text element here. In here we can say entry.configuration, and then in here we can just quickly access the custom symbol. And in here we could, for example, take the display string, or we could take the identifier, which would make more sense in our case. Since all of this is optionally chained, we need to provide a default value or force unwrapped. Let's say for a default value, no custom symbol selected, just like that. And why do we want the identifier? Well, because in our intent handler, we put the symbol into the identifier and the name of the stock into the display name. So we obviously need the identifier. Okay, let's run this once again in the simulator and see if it works. Okay, and as you can see, the widget updated. It now shows two text labels, and just to make sure that this is actually the custom symbol here, we can edit the widget and select another custom symbol, so Tesla in this case. Go back, it will refresh, and you can see that Tesla is up there. So now you could, for example, use this custom symbol to fetch the data instead of the symbol that we used beforehand. Okay, that's it for this video. I hope you learned something. I think this is quite useful. If you did, then please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Bye! Hey, this is Flo and welcome back to the WidgetKit course. In this episode, I will show you how to respond to user interactions. So how to notice that the app got called or got opened when the user tapped on the widget. Let me show you the simulator for that. So right here I have our stocks app widget, and when I tap on it, then the app will open. And in this case, as I just implemented a very simple version to show you how it works, it will have a text here with the symbol that was selected in the widget configuration. So the widget shows the stocks data for Apple, and when the app is opened, then this AAPL string is passed into the app, and we could now work with it and, for example, open a detail view or whatever. So that's what the app will look like in the end. For that, there is basically 3 steps. So we will have to construct a URL with which the widget will then open the app. So to actually get the symbol inside of the URL, we will add a computed property to our stock data model. So we will just call it URL, and it will also be of type URL. And you can actually make this optional, because the function that we're going to use will work with optional, but I will make it non-optional for now, because there's actually 2 ways to implement this into the widget. So now we will have to construct a URL here. So I will use a guardlet just to make sure that it's not optional. So guardlet URL equals a URL from a string. We will talk about this string in a second. And if this is not possible, then actually I will throw a fatal error, because the URL should always be able to get constructed. And in here I will just say fail to construct URL. And then in the end, I will just return the URL like this. Okay, so now let's talk about the actual URL. So you can make this whatever you want. But here is a simple idea of how I would implement it, and which will give you actually a lot of customizability. So let's see how it will look like. So first of all, I will put the app name basically as the scheme. So which would be HTTPS in a regular web URL. Then colon // then the name of the route, basically. Let's call it this. So I will call it symbol, and then we can pass arguments in here. So what I will do is just pass our how's it called, metadata, dot symbol. So if we scroll up here a bit, you can see we have a metadata inside of the stock data, which has the symbol of this stock. Okay, and I will just put that into the URL. Why am I structuring it like this? You will see that once we are inside of the app and receiving the actual open URL call, because then this will make a lot more sense, I would think. Okay, second step is go into our stocks widget entry view. So in our widget extension, the view that is actually displayed. So in a past episode, I showed you how to work with different widget families, but we're just focusing on the system medium style for now. And what we can just do is to the outermost container here, so the VStack, we will add the widget URL modifier. And in here we can pass the URL that should be passed to the app when it's opened through the widget. So we can just say our entry dot stock data, this is optional, dot URL, so the computed property that we just created over here in the stock data. And now every time that the app is opened, when the user taps on the widget, this URL will be passed to the app. So as you can see, this takes an optional URL, and that's why it's fine that our stock data is actually optional here. Another way would be to not put the modifier here, but instead wrap everything in a link. So I will just show you how that would work right here. So just use a link with the destination of our entry.stockdata.url. But the issue here now is that this does not work with optionals. So you would have to force unwrap the stock data, which is kind of sketchy, I would say. And then inside of the link, you can put everything that you want the user to be able to tap on. What this allows you is, for example, having in a larger widget, you could then have different stock symbols, for example, and depending on which one the user taps on, the app should perform something different when it's opened. So you could have different links in a grid layout, for example. Okay, but in this case we don't need it, as there's just one symbol that we're talking about, so we can just use the .widget URL modifier on our outermost container VStack here. Okay, and that's already everything that needs to be done in the widget extension. So next we can move back into the main app and specifically into our content view and into the body of the content view. Now here, once again, on the outermost container, you can also do it, for example, in the list, but I will do it on the navigation view. You can have a modifier on open URL, and this allows you to, actually let me transform this into a trailing closure syntax like this. This allows you to grab the URL that the app was opened with. Okay, and inside of this modifier, we can now grab the URL and work with it. And this is the part where we're actually going to talk about the scheme and the host. So we will just make sure that they are what we want them to be. So guard URL.scheme equals to stocks app. So this part here. Then URL.host equals to symbol, so this part here. And now we can also say let symbol equals URL.path components, and let's just take the first one like this, or the second one like this. Let's also say else, and if this doesn't work, we will just return out of the function. And now we can actually work with this symbol that we grabbed out of the URL, which is basically this last part here. And just for simplicity's sake, I will do it quick and dirty. So I will just add a state var symbol, and I will just make it an empty string in the beginning, and then at the top of our list, I will just add a text of this symbol, just like this. Okay, actually, since the URL is not optional, we can remove it from our guard statement and make it a bit simpler, and then just say let symbol equals url.path components one line lower, and then we can just say self.symbol equals symbol, and that way we assign what we just got here into our state variable. Okay, and that is already it. That is how the effect, or how you can actually send data from the widget to the app when the user taps on it. So let me show you again. Here's the widget, which shows data for the AAPL symbol. The user taps on it, and the AAPL symbol string is passed into the app. Okay, that's it for this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey, this is Flo, and welcome back to the WidgetKit course. In this part, I will show you how to let the system, so iOS, know that the user is currently interacting with your app, which then basically means that iOS can suggest the user your widget even though they are not actively using it. So for example, if your user is currently looking at a specific stock symbol, like in our case, since we're working with the stocks app, and he always does that around noon, then your system, then you can give your system the ability to suggest your user your stocks widget every day at around noon, even though they are not, even though they haven't added the stocks widget to their home screen. To do this, there is actually a great session in WWDC 2021. And we're basically just going over the code here, and I'm showing you how to use this in the stocks app. Okay, so if you want to, you can just search for the video Donate Intents and expand your app's presence in the developer app or on the developer website for all of the WWDC videos, but we will just go over the code very briefly. Okay, so let's get back into Xcode. If you remember, then inside of our widget, we have an intent definition for our configuration intent. And this configuration intent is what allows the user to configure the widget. So in our case, to set a custom stock symbol which they want to be displayed. Now, in order to donate intents to the system, which is the way to let the system know that the user is using the app, we first of all need to have our intent in our main app target, like this. So you definitely need to have this check mark here. And in here we also need to say intent is eligible for Siri suggestions. And then in the suggestions area down here, we need to add a supported combination of our parameters. It's very easy in our case because we only have one parameter. Just select it, hit add supported combination like this. Now we can select it here, write a summary and a description. Then we can also choose a default image, for example, your app icon or whatever, and then this would be shown when the intent is shown to the user. Okay, now we can go into our actual app. As you remember, this is a very simple app, so I'm just in the content view model. You can do this anywhere with a bit more context. For the sake of this video, I will just, first of all, make this all a bit larger and then hide the right hand side here. I will just create a function called donate intent, which you can then call whenever you want to donate an intent to the system. To use all of this, we also need to import intents like this. Okay, now we can create an intent. So let's say let intent equal configuration intent. That's the name of our intent definition. Okay, now we can say intent dot custom symbol equals a custom symbol. Let's just use a simple initializer here. So one with an identifier of, let's say, AAPL and the display name of Apple. So we could, for example, call this function when the user taps on the Apple stocks data, for example. Okay. Now there's actually only one more thing to do to create an interaction and to donate this intent to the system. So let's say let interaction equal in interaction, like this. Then we can just use this easy initializer. We can just pass in the intent that we want to donate, and then for the response, let's just pass it nil for now. You can play around with this later if you want to. And now to actually donate our intent, we just have to say interaction dot donate. All right, now we get a completion block here with a potential error, and you could handle this error here. You could, for example, say if let error equals error, so it's not nil, then you should handle it. You can also just print it out. Okay, and this is actually all that you need to do to donate an intent to the system. Once again, right now AAPL and Apple is hard-coded. In your actual app, you should get that data from somewhere, for example, when the user taps on one widget or does a specific action. Okay. Next up, let's look at how you can actually delete these intents. You might want to do this because you're saying, oh, maybe I shouldn't have donated it, maybe the user only once did this, or whatever the reason may be. So to donate the intent, you need to also give the interaction an identifier. So let's say interaction.identifier equals AAPL interaction. This should be unique, obviously, so maybe you should add a timestamp there or whatever it may be, and then save this identifier somewhere persistently in your app so you can access it once again later on. And now to remove this intent, we can just say in interaction dot delete with identifier. We can pass in an array here, but we just want to delete this one interaction, so just pass in the identifier of the interaction here, and then we once again have a completion block where we could handle a potential error. So let me just copy the error handling from up here, paste it into the delete function, and that's already it. So let me go over it real briefly. You first of all create the intent that you need for your widget configuration and that the user is actually basically doing right now and that you want the system to suggest as a widget. So in our case, the configuration intent. Then we set the custom symbol to a custom symbol instance. We create an in interaction with the intent that we just created. We can optionally give it an identifier and then just donate our intent. This is all the code that we need, and then the deletion is even simpler. Okay, that's it with the video. If you liked it, please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.